Hi, this is Sean D'Souza from Psychotactics.com, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about working less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy your work and enjoy your vacation time. This is the 3-Month Vacation. I'm Sean D'Souza. If you were to go to India today and you stepped into a Hindu household, you would be surprised at what you saw at the doorstep. You would see a swastika. Yes, the very same swastika that the Germans used in World War II. The same swastika that came to be hated by everyone who saw it then and today. So what is the swastika doing on the doorstep of so many Hindu households? The reality is that the swastika comes from the Sanskrit word swastik, which means good luck. And it has been around for thousands of years. While it's prominently found in Indian culture even today, it was also found in ancient Greece. It can be seen on the remains of the ancient city of Troy, which existed 4,000 years ago. The Nordic tribes, the Christians, the Teutonic Knights, the swastika goes back a long way. In modern history, Coca-Cola used it, Carlsberg used it on their beer bottles, the Boy Scouts adopted it, and the Girls Club of America, they called their magazine Swastika. It was used on playing cards and even by the American military units during World War I. It can be seen on RAF planes as late as 1939. And then Hitler came along. He took something that was wonderful and incredibly powerful and made it something evil. He took something that was empowering and twisted it in his own way to make it work for him. He changed the meaning of the word. And that is the kind of thing that happens very often when we look to learn. When we look around, we see that people call themselves teachers. But in reality, they're not teachers, they're just preachers. When you get this ton of information in the form of video and audio and PDF, you think, well, I am being taught by someone. But in reality, all you're doing is getting a ton of information. You're getting a preacher instead of a teacher. And while it might sound like just words being twisted or replaced, there is a very big difference between a preacher and a teacher. So how do we know what makes a preacher versus a teacher? That's what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at 3 things. The first is the responsibility factor. The second is the 3 benchmark system. And the third, the ability for the student to become the teacher. Let's start out with the first one, which is the responsibility factor. If you try to learn a language like Spanish or German or French, it will take you many, many months to get there. And in every classroom, you have the bright students and the not so bright students, or at least until Michel Thomas came along. Michel Thomas was a language teacher, and he didn't believe in bright students and dull students. He believed that the responsibility lay with the teacher. He made a bold claim. He made a claim that you could learn the fundamentals of grammar in any language within 10 hours. And then he set about proving the fact. The BBC followed him around for several days. And if you look up Michel Thomas on YouTube, you will find a 3-part episode that shows you how he took these students who were told by their teachers that they were not supposed to learn a language, that they were stupid, that they were dull, that they should never bother to try and learn any language. And then he set them down in a classroom. And then in a week or so, they were already speaking the language. This is the language, the very same language that they were told they should give up. They should never try this anymore. So what happened? When we ask what happened, we're trying to solve the problem with language. What did he do? How did we learn languages like that? We don't look at that. We look at what was the core of Michel's system. And the core of Michel's system was responsibility. And he felt that the responsibility of the teaching didn't lie with the student. It lay with the teacher. And here we have Michel giving instructions to the students in the classroom.
Before starting, I'm going to set up a very important rule, a very important ground rule. And that rule is for you never to worry about remembering. Never to worry about remembering anything, and therefore not to try. Never to try to remember anything from one moment to the next. This is a method with a responsibility for your remembering and for learning, isn't it, teaching? So if at any point there's something you don't remember, this is not your problem. It will be up to me to know why you don't remember individually and what to do about it.
When you think about that statement for a few minutes, it changes your whole mindset. It means that the person learning under you is not responsible. And you think, well, how's that possible? You can't control what someone is doing. Maybe you have online courses like we do, and they're sitting in South Africa or Australia or the United States, and you can't control what they're doing. Yes, you can. And this is the difference between a preacher and a teacher. A preacher simply gives you information. You get more CDs, more information, more PDFs, more videos. But whose responsibility is it for you to succeed? The teacher, on the other hand, changes the way they give you information because they realize that if you don't get these tiny increments, you will start and you will go a few steps and then you will give up. And that's the difference between a preacher and a teacher. A teacher doesn't believe in dull students. A teacher believes that it is their responsibility to figure out how to get across to that student. So let's say you have a web design company. And let's say you're giving instructions to your clients how to set up their websites. And let's just say for a second that the client comes back and asks you a whole bunch of questions. Are they dull? The answer is, whose responsibility is it? It's your responsibility. The reason why that client has not figured out what they should do and how they should go about it is because you haven't given them precise instructions. You've hurried through the process, or you just have the curse of knowledge. You know so much that you don't realize that you're going through so many steps, and therefore you have become a preacher. You're no longer a teacher. You're not breaking down things into steps that are foolproof. And when we see clients doing silly things, what we say is, well, they're not smart, or they're silly, or they're stupid, but the responsibility lies with you. If they fail, you have failed. That's the difference between a preacher and a teacher. One of the best examples I have for you is this Yes and Yes pricing grid on the Psychotactics website. So when you go and you buy any product or any service or any course on Psychotactics, you will encounter the price grid, which is where you click the button to buy now. And we have a regular and a premium pricing there. Now, as the teacher, it is my duty to get that message across. How do you create a pricing grid so that you can earn 10% or 15% more when you have that pricing grid on your own website. And people make mistakes. If there's one thing that I've seen where clients consistently make mistakes, it's on this pricing grid. We tell them to put ticks, they put crosses. We tell them to put red ticks, they put blue ticks. And this is because everyone interprets your information in their own way. And that's absolutely normal. They want to be creative, but that creativity doesn't end up being beneficial to them. And clients end up buying the regular instead of the premium. Now, what's my job as a teacher? My job as a teacher is very simple. My job is to make sure that they get it. If they don't get the pricing grid right, then I have to take responsibility for that. So in the book, which is Dartboard Pricing, it goes through steps. One step, second step, third step. Then it shows the mistakes you can make and the mistakes other people have made. So what it's doing there, even with a book, even when I cannot be there, I have to make sure that it's my responsibility for you to get your pricing grid right. And it's very easy to say that people don't understand. Look, I told them how to do it and they didn't do it. But no, it's your responsibility. And that's the critical element, the difference between a preacher and a teacher. 2.5 years ago, I started coaching my niece, Marsha. She wanted to get better at her studies, and so we started the coaching. And I sat her down on the first day and I said to her, Marsha, if you get everything wrong at school, whose fault is it? And she said, it's my fault. And I said, no, it's my fault. If you get everything wrong, it's my fault as a teacher. And she said, cool. And that's the whole point. That's the difference between the preacher and the teacher. You have to take responsibility. That's how you know that you're picking the right teacher, because they take responsibility for you. They don't just dump information, they make sure that you get it right. And this takes us to the second part of this podcast. And it's called the 3-step benchmark. So what is the 3-step benchmark? When I was 12 years old, I used to come home from school and I'd be very hungry. School would finish at 4 p.m. and then it'd be a long wait until dinner. Dinner in India is a lot like Mediterranean countries, and it's late, so it's about 8:30 or so. So I'd come home and I'd be ravenous. I want to eat something. And no one would be at home. But there in the pantry on the shelves would be a packet of ramen noodles. And in this case, it was Maggi noodles. Now, this had a masala flavor, which you don't get in other countries, but you do get in India. So what I'd do is I'd boil some water, I'd add the noodles, I'd add the tastemaker, which was the masala flavor, and then 5 minutes later, I'd be eating it. But notice what I did? I only took 3 steps. Boil water, add noodles, add tastemaker. And this is the difference between a teacher and a preacher. They use this 3-step benchmark system, if they're aware of it or not. And a preacher will not do that. A preacher will give you a lot of instructions. They will tell you you should do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you get lost in that whole sequence of things. I know this because this is what I used to do. I would give people instructions. Here's what you need to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. Not anymore. You need to solve the problem in 3 steps. And if the client cannot get to the other side within 3 steps, like Maggi noodles, then you have given too many instructions. If they keep coming back to you and asking you something, then you have given too many instructions. There is no other way. The responsibility lies with you. We just finished the headlines course for 2015, and there are many ways to write a headline. Now, a lot of people will tell you to just copy headlines, but that's stupid. You should know how to write headlines just like you know how to speak, how to write. There is a structure and a system and a format to write headlines. Now, the problem is also that there are many ways to write those headlines. And if you want your student to get to mastery, then you have to follow this 3-step benchmark. If you give them an instruction and they can't get there within 3 steps, then you have made a mistake. So let's take an example of the headlines. Let's say I needed to get you to write better headlines in the next few minutes. Well, how am I going to get this done on a podcast? Here's how you do it. You restrict it to just 3 steps or fewer. So what you're going to do is going to put either even or and you're going to put this in parentheses or brackets as you call it. So here's how you do it. You say how to raise prices even when clients are price conscious. How to raise prices even when the competition is offering discounts. The headline with even in it creates a contrast. So it's a headline going one way and then it starts to go the other way. And now let's use and. How to consistently raise prices and still keep 95% of your clients. Or how to tell amazing stories and connect the stories to your business articles. So what we have here is and even. And the and moves the idea forward and the even takes it a step back. Or it provides contrast. And if you're thinking to yourself, wait, that was such a small step. That's the whole point. This is how teachers teach. The preachers will give you 7, 8 different steps to do. And in the headline course, we spend a week doing this. And people still make mistakes. Bit by bit, we outline it. A very small thing can be interpreted in many different ways. And a preacher will just dump information on you. A teacher will take a very small element, just 3 steps. If you can't get that client to do what you want in 3 steps, it's your fault. It's your responsibility. And when you're looking for a teacher, look for a teacher that has these tiny increments, that helps you get there to the next stage instead of telling you how silly you are, how dull you are. And this takes us to the third part, which is the most scariest benchmark of all, which is when the student becomes the teacher. When I go to seminars, I notice something very interesting. A speaker will stand up and make this presentation, and then they'll have all these slides and all of this information and all of this statistics, and then at the end of that presentation, they get arousing applause. They get a lot of tweets, they get all of that stuff, but what is the benchmark of the presentation? The real benchmark of the presentation is that the person sitting there in the audience should be able to say what you said in their presentation. Now, that sounds bizarre, doesn't it? Of course it is bizarre, but that's what a teacher does. A teacher makes sure that you don't go out there with your head full of information, all this shock and awe that you bring to the presentation. That's not relevant. What's relevant is what the student can then teach. When that student goes out, can they repeat exactly what you said, and often in the sequence that you said it? If you come to a psychotactics course, or you come to a workshop, or you come to a presentation, and one of the most important benchmarks is that you should be able to repeat what I've just taught you. You should be able to tell someone else exactly what you learned, the sequence in which you learned it, and then you have become the teacher. And if the person cannot do that, the client there, the person in the audience cannot do that, then there is something wrong with the way you're teaching. It's that simple. If all you've done is given information, then they're going to cling on to some fact or the other. They're going to cling on to one fact or 2 facts or 3 facts, but they don't have that system in place because you didn't put that system in place. And that's the difference between a teacher and a preacher. A teacher will make sure that the student knows how to do whatever it is that they're teaching. Their responsibility is to get that student to know what they're teaching. It's not just information being given out, it is application. And it's instant application. And And when there is complication, there is no application. When there are too many steps, there is no application. And so you start to see the difference between a teacher and a preacher. In fact, let's summarize, because you'll need to be the teacher. If someone asks you, what did you learn on this podcast? Well, you'll need to know the difference between the teacher and the preacher. You'll need to know how to change your methods. You'll also need to know how to choose a teacher versus a preacher. So the first thing that we covered today was the factor that Michelle Thomas taught us, and that is the responsibility lies with the teacher. You are responsible. The student is not responsible. You are responsible. It doesn't matter how you look at it, you are still responsible. When you take on a task, you have to make sure that you formulate your teaching in a way that enables the student to learn. And that changes the whole perspective of teaching. And you can do this very simply by having the 3-step benchmark in place. If the student cannot get from this point to that point in 3 steps, then you've given too many steps. You have to reduce those number of steps. And that takes us to the third part, which is, how do you know that the student is now smart enough? And that is because they have become the teacher. So you go from this factor of changing your mindset, responsibility, to then boiling it down to just 3 steps. And then finally, you know that they have reached there because now they can teach what you just taught them. That is the difference between a teacher and a preacher. Whether we're in the service business or a product business, we have to make sure that we get this message across. This is not just about training. This is about getting your clients to achieve what they want to achieve. And most of us will blame the client. If you find yourself blaming the client, listen to Michelle Thomas's words yet again.
This is a method with a responsibility for your remembering and for learning, isn't it, teaching? So if at any point there's something you don't remember, this is not your problem. It will be up to me to know why you don't remember individually and what to do about it.
The responsibility lies with you. It's your fault. It's always your fault. And when you say that to your client, they'll be like Marsha. They'll say, cool. And this brings us to the end of this podcast. You can find me always on Twitter or Facebook. I'm at Sean D'Souza. That's one word, Sean D'Souza. You can also email me at sean@psychotactics.com. However, if you're listening to this podcast in sequence, I may not be available. I won't be available for the next 2 weeks. I will be in Uluru, which is in the middle of Australia. There is this massive rock there. And there's nothing else but this massive rock in 3 hotels. And that's where we're going to be. We're going to be in Alice Springs. It's going to be really hot there. I hear it's about 33 degrees centigrade, which is 91 degrees Fahrenheit. I wish it were cooler, but hey, I've always wanted to go to Australia, this part of Australia specifically. And you can only ever go there in the colder months, and now we have slipped past the cold, rainy months and we're into October. So we're going to have to put up with some of the heat. And while we're away, make sure that you read the Brain Audit, because it'll show you why customers buy and why they don't. There's also the Web Component series, which is website secrets. And you learn how to create your homepage, your About Us page, your download page very effectively. And you can find it at psychotactics.com/web. And if you'd like to join us at 5000BC, that's 5000BC.com. That's a community of mostly introverts. And there's me, the extrovert. And you'll find that 5000BC is a membership site like no other, because I'm there all the time, 17,000 times a day, except for the next 2 weeks when I will be in Australia. That's it from Psychotactics and the 3-month vacation. Make sure you send this over to your friends as well so that they can listen to the 3-month vacation podcast. Bye for now.